You know me as a stickler, I ask everybody stay on task, don't detract and kind of go off on a different path. Let's all stay on focus here because we had a lot of items tonight. Which roll call shows that all counselors, with the exception of Counselor Gardner, are present for our Community Development Committee meeting, which jump right into it. Our first item, number 2, is presentation of the Bangor Area Comprehensive Transportation System, BACS, bus stop policy and design guidelines. And we actually have people with us tonight. Welcome, ladies.
Hi, how are you?
Well,
I'm just going to share my screen real quick here with the presentation and get us back on the right slide. We're going backwards for a second. Sorry about that. So thanks for having us back. My name is Sarah Devlin. I'm the executive director for BACS. And here with me tonight is Connie Reed, and she is the project manager for the bus stop policy and design guidelines, as well as the project manager for the next phase, bus stop designation. So the bus stop policy and design guidelines have been developed as the first step from transitioning the community connector from a flag stop system to a designated bus stop system, which was recommended in the 2019 regional transit study. And the purpose of this document that we're going to review tonight is to provide guidance to the stakeholders of the community connector bus system to ensure that there is consistency in design, placement, and location of bus stops, as well as to ensure that bus stops are managed and maintained uniformly throughout the region. It is important for all of the entities that are part of this to coordinate and to work closely together, especially during the design and construction of the facilities. Designated stops will provide better customer service by providing on-time performance and predictability. They'll improve the rider's understanding of the system, and they will offer more facilities with brand recognition. It will also provide the data necessary to implement technologies such as trip planning and real-time information for passengers. The bus stop policy and design guidelines were developed through the efforts and inputs of a work group consisting of the community connector staff, municipal staff from each community participating in the community connector system, as well as Maine DOT transit staff. The document is made up of 2 distinct parts. It outlines the design guidelines by which bus stops will be located, designed, and placed following industry standards and best practices, as well as ADA requirements for accessibility, while also considering the unique characteristics of the greater Bangor region. The document also outlines the policies relating to the management and maintenance of the bus stops. It includes coordination and cooperation between jurisdictions and stakeholders, as well as defining roles and responsibilities. And while the work group wishes to present this draft document to municipal councils and public for review, they felt strongly that in order to finalize the policies of how the stops will be managed and maintained, it is necessary to understand the total number and scope of bus stops and facilities that will be in the region. So the policy portion of the document will be revisited, and this will be presented for final approval after the project to designate the stops is complete. And now I'm going to turn it over to Connie, the project manager, and she's going to go through the factors that will be considered when designating the stops, as well as get into a little bit of the details of the guidelines for each stop.
Thank you. Due to the number of factors involved in determining bus stop locations, each new or relocated stop must be examined on a case-by-case basis. Existing conditions and safety, convenience, and accessibility considerations affect the way that bus stops should be spaced and designed. In many cases, there are certain existing or planned locations for bus stops which stand out as being particularly important. So when determining bus stop locations, stops will be initially planned at major transit generators, safe crossing locations, and transfer points. Once those critical locations are settled, the remaining stops can be planned for optimal spacing. There are 4 elements of every bus stop: stop location, in-street design, curbside design, and passenger amenities. The US DOT ADA standards for transportation facilities apply to facilities used by state and local governments to provide public transportation services. This includes bus stops. Any new or altered bus stops must meet these standards. Bus stop location includes the location relative to intersection and stop spacing. In general, bus stops should be spaced every quarter mile, with denser areas requiring stop space closer together and less dense areas being spaced about every half mile. So keeping those generalizations in mind, we have set target number of stops per mile with maximum number of stops per mile by environment type. The bus stop zone requires space for decelerating, stopping, and accelerating. The length required will vary depending on location relative to the intersection, but in general will be between 70 and 120 feet. There are two types of bus stop zones, inline and offline. Inline zones are, are curbside stops, part of the street, and they participate in the general pattern of traffic. Offline bus stop zones, such as a bus bay or a pullout, is out of the way of traffic flow and designated for bus only. There are three primary elements of curbside design. First, an ADA compliant, accessible pedestrian connection to the bus stop. This includes a clear width through and around the bus stop and curb ramps to safely transition from the roadway to curb sidewalk with detectable warnings. Second, an ADA compliant loading area where the front doors of the bus open, also clear of obstructions such as utility poles, trees, or signs. And third, a slip resistant waiting area, again, free of obstructions. And the fourth element of bus stop is amenities. Amenities provided at the waiting area depend on the bus stop type, but may be limited by physical and financial constraints as well. Three types of bus stops have been defined by the work group. A basic stop is one with low daily passengers, and there are no comfort amenities. The required elements include a bus stop sign and post and an ADA compliant landing area. These elements are required at all the bus stops. A bench stop is one with a moderate level of daily passengers, and comfort amenities include passenger seating. A shelter stop is one with high level passenger daily usage. Comfort amenities include bus shelter and passenger seating. Additional elements that may be found at all bus stop types include pavement markings and lighting. Optional amenities may include trash receptacles, bicycle parking, information kiosks, and route or system maps. The landing pad is the top priority in order to comply with ADA mandates. Other amenities are important, but should not displace investment in the proper landing pads. Locally, consideration of transit needs and impacts is a required step during the site plan or development review process, can maximize construction efficiencies, avoid frustration of costly retrofitted infrastructure, and make accommodation for its impact to existing and planned transit service. Recognizing the transit system as a critical component of the larger regional community should be reflected in local comprehensive plans. Future land use plans and policies should encourage a more transit and pedestrian supportive development pattern. Incorporating language into local land use code to ensure that new development adequately makes accommodation for impacts to existing and planned transit service offers greater support and ensures efficiencies in future investments. Bus stop infrastructure needs reviewed during the municipal development and site plan review process will be a coordinated effort between municipal and community connector staff to determine if the developer will be required to incorporate bus stop improvements into the development plan and or provide for a funding mechanism for improvements for new or existing bus stop and or related infrastructure or amenities. Requests to proposals to add, relocate, or eliminate a bus stop made by the community connector, a municipality, or a private entity. Community connector staff and municipal staff will conduct an on-site review of the proposed location, and the request and review findings will be documented and presented to the BAX Transit Committee for review, concurrence, and approvals. Community connector must develop and implement a bus stop maintenance program. As such, coordinating and securing agreements with all entities to ensure everyone understands their roles and responsibilities for maintaining bus stops is extremely important. In addition to a maintenance policy and the associated agreements, policies and agreements between stakeholders related to administrative roles and responsibilities ensure the proper ongoing maintenance and management of bus stops. Having uniform and consistent bus stop infrastructure and amenities is essential for customer service and brand recognition. Community Connector will work with municipal partners to develop consistent bus stop element standards, which will be incorporated into these guidelines. All Community Connector bus stops, whether funded by private entity or publicly funded, will be required to meet the Community Connector design and appearance standards and specifications. Community Connector will continue to apply for annual formula funding as well as competitive discretionary funding opportunities. However, there's no guarantee of the continued availability of federal funding. In 2020, Community Connector received an award to add passenger shelters and bus boarding areas for a total project amount of $496,000. In addition to FTA funding, other programs and or strategies can be explored to subsidize the cost of maintaining bus stop facilities, such as bus stop shelter advertising programs, private funding, and or adopt a stop programs.
So the next phase of this project is to complete the system-wide designation bus stop plan. BACS will be developing the plan in consultation and collaboration with the Community Connector staff, the municipal partners, and an advisory group, which will include community representatives. Public outreach and education will be a big part of this next phase. There will be several outreach events to educate and obtain public feedback for the proposed plans. The final plan will include maps of each route detailing location and type of bus stops, as well as a bus stop inventory. In addition to the inventory, a facility improvement and amenity needs plan will be prepared to assist in developing fiscal and capital plans. As the project progresses, there will be information posted regularly on the project web page, which is linked on the BACS website. The draft bus stop policy and design guidelines document can also be viewed at the BACS website, and public comment should be made on or before 4 p.m. on Friday, April 30th. And that can be done via email to Connie Reed or written postal mail. And with that, I can take any questions. Connie and I would be happy to answer any questions. And I would just also note that under the funding sources information that Connie had shared, we also submitted this project to Representative Golden's office to be considered for an earmark with the next reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Act. So hopefully that will also give us some additional funding for this project. And with that,
Great. Sarah and Connie, thank you. So I'm going to open this up to questions from counselors. Cheryl?
Yeah, Connie, or Sarah can answer this. Does your advisory group have a representative from the University of Maine? As I think our students would probably ride the bus more than a lot of people here, but students for sure.
There was not a advisory member on this work group, but on the next phase of the actual designation plan, we will be having a larger work group, and there will be a larger public outreach component, and we absolutely will be having community members and students on that advisory work group.
Great, thank you.
And we can also, just to add on to that, we can make one of our public outreach specific to the university, one of those education opportunities. We can design that specific for student input. Connie and I can add that to our work.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Councilor Mitchell?
Yeah, I thank you for the presentation. Question about the minimum and maximum number of stops per mile. Do you have a sense as far as the density in Orono? Like, and what that would warrant for the number of stops required? Is it a requirement or is it a recommendation, I guess? And
Well, because of the number of factors that may or may not allow us to follow those exact guidelines, you may have some, it's not going to exactly fit into those spacing guidelines. That's why there's a maximum of 6 stops per mile rather than every 200 feet or 800 feet or 1500 feet, because it just, the way our geography is and the way our transit generators are located, it just wouldn't fit that way. And that's one of the reasons why the work group actually decided they wanted to hold off on finalizing the policies so that we could get a greater understanding of the number of stops system-wide before finalizing the policies. So that's going to be part of the work we do in the next
that
phase.
inventory, so
Right.
you have a better idea of where it's stopping now. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Anyone else? Lori? You're muted.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this presentation and for the report. On the report under, there are places where it says federal funding would be covering the cost. For example, the bus stop purchase of the materials and amenities, but then it has a little footnote that said there's no guarantee there'll be federal funding available. So what's the possibility that this won't happen if you can't get federal funding? I mean, I'm glad that Congressman Golden's office is, encouraging you to put something in, but it's a great idea, and I'm with Councilor Mitchell, a little concerned about having this bus stops spaced so far apart. Then we go from the flag down system to the spaced out that people will be missed. But let's say it happens. What happens if we don't get federal funding?
So I can take a first shot at this, and then Connie can add where I leave out some details. But so I think what the intent was that note that says that it would be covered by federal funding is that it's eligible under federal funding guidelines. So it is just an eligible expense. So we do have the grant for the discretionary funding, which is explicit for bus stops, but it is region wide. So we already know that there's not enough funding to meet the need even without have done the designation yet. But then the community connector gets formula funding, which your municipality contributes to for the match of that. And they would have to prioritize if there was no more discretionary funding to be had, they would have to prioritize their funding for the implementation of this plan, which is at their discretion to do. They can do that. And if the designation plan is a priority for Orono, I would encourage you all to let the community connector know that this is a priority once the plan is complete, and that you want this to be next up for funding consideration through their formula funding, because they do receive formula funding for things like this. And that I don't see changing. If anything, under the way the administration is going, I would say that possibly increase formula funding. And there's a lot of discretionary funding opportunities right now for infrastructure, and this would be considered that. So I think that there is going to be federal funding. It's just a matter of whether the community connector prioritizes it for the implementation of this plan.
It's tough to have this kind of thing that listens to it.
Any of the other counselors have input before we go for the second round here? No. Okay, so Counselor Mitchell, you had more additional questions?
Yeah, I guess I was wondering, not so much like the maximum number that might be allowed, but like, is this the system gonna require a town to have a minimum number of stops? So that's the piece around the funding. Like, do we need to be thinking ahead because we are going to have a minimum of 4 stops per mile through the village district or something? Like, or is this just a recommendation that you have that number of stops?
So when we actually do the citing of the stops, I'm going to have a draft map, a draft plan that I'm going to bring to municipal staff, to probably Rob and Kyle. And we'll look over it together to make sure there's nothing in town that's going on that we're not aware of that would prohibit something from being, that's just not a good place for a bus stop. So municipal staff will have first right of refusal, I guess, of where bus stops, whether or not that's a proper location. So there's absolutely going to be municipal input at the beginning before there's any public discussion about anything.
But to
So
answer your question, there's no minimum requirement.
no,
I mean, but to have your service, you're gonna want stop somewhere, because the days of somebody standing and just waving their arm is not going
not
to
going to
exist.
happen.
So
Yeah.
you're gonna want to have a designated location for people to get on the bus. And the per mile stops is a guideline, but that's just one part of a guideline for consideration with all these other things for generators. So no, there is not a minimum. Yeah, there's no minimum for a municipality to participate.
The purpose of
Oh. Connie
think
must have
Connie
lost
froze.
connection.
So let's just keep it going until Connie comes back on.
That's fine.
So I actually do like the adopt a stop kind of concept that you were talking about earlier. I think that's actually kind of unique. It allows for a business that wants to be able to advertise too, I'm assuming, correct?
Yes.
That if they adopt that spot, they can put whatever placard or whatever, probably specified based on what your criteria are. But the question I had was, is there a difference though between the community connector as it runs the whole length and the Black Bear Express? So Black Bear Express in my mind wouldn't be part of this, correct?
Well, it's not technically part of the community connector system because it's just for the university, and but it would also want designated stops, because the whole purpose of the designated stops is that is what needs to happen for the system to allow us to implement technology, such as when you go to a larger metropolitan area and you can go on Google Transit and say, okay, bus 4 is going to be here in 2 minutes. You can't do that now with either the Black Bear Orono Express or the community connector, because but I believe that the Black Bear Orono Express, actually, it's my understanding that they were going to do kind of a pilot for some technology, because that is kind of a closed system, and you could implement bus stops more easily on that system because it's kind of fixed. So I think the intent would to do it on both systems, but they are integrated too, as far as the technology is concerned. So if you're on the Black Bear Orono Express, you will be able to access the technology for the community connector.
So that would actually end up being a separate thing from the connector specifically for that routing system that we would have to determine where those stops would be.
Yes, that will be, but it will be, I think Connie would do it as it's intended to be, as all part of this process.
Well, and to be fair, the Black Bear Orono Express actually is maybe hybrid-ish, because I think the drivers would still pull over if somebody waved their hand at them, but we do have designated stops because we try to keep a very tight 30-minute headway, which is essentially how long the route is. So we did have the Black Bear Orono Express up on Google Transit at one point, and then the pandemic hit, and we've changed the route. So we've kind of backed away from keeping that updated until we're a little bit more fixed.
So there are a handful of areas that are basically are already doing designated stops, and the Black Bear Orono Express is one of those areas. I think there are a few other municipalities that have taken it upon themselves to kind of get riders to congregate in one area to catch the bus. So I would say in simple terms, the Black Bear Orono Express is already ahead of the game for this work, but it will all be incorporated into this because the systems do speak to one another.
Great. Is there any additional questions from council? Great, hearing nothing. Lori, go ahead.
I just want to thank for this great work, and it was wonderful to see that there was a community group that participated, including our own Rob Yerxa. Thank you very much, and I think that it looks like very nice work, so thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the participation from municipal staff. It was very helpful.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. We truly appreciate it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
So let's keep her moving here. So the next item on our agenda, item number 3, is the review of the vegetation ordinance revisions proposed by Orono Tree Board. Rob, is this yours or so? Rob?
Yeah, so as Public Works Director, one of my hats that I wear is the tree warden. And the tree warden is responsible for enforcing Chapter 38, the Vegetation Ordinance. Vegetation Ordinance really is just a way, it sets up the regulation of planting, maintenance, and removal of trees in public areas. So in rights of ways and parks and any other town-owned property. The ordinance, most of it was getting to be about 25 years old. So the tree board, who was established within the construct of the vegetation ordinance, felt like it was a good time to maybe take a look at that, do some updating, and get the ordinance in line with some of the common practices that we were kind of already doing. So I thought I would just, we started working on this with the tree board back in January. We've had a few different drafts put together, and we think that the one we're proposing to you tonight for revision kind of meets the goals of what the tree board had. So I thought I'd just quickly go through what the changes were that were proposed, and then I'll just open it up for questions and discussion if that works. The first thing that you'll notice is that we've switched the articles, Article 2 and Article 3 swap places. We felt this was appropriate because Article 2 sort of set up the structure of the regulation, and then Article 3 sort of bolstered some of that and talked about management of Dutch elm disease. So that was a big change for the ordinance. We updated some of the definitions, added a couple things that we felt were important, changed some things within the membership, setting up the membership. We added 2 associate members to the board, kind of like the way the planning board works. So if a member that's a voting member can't attend a meeting, we can still get a quorum with one of the associate members to step up. We defined what a quorum was. We decided that the original ordinance talked about at least half of the board having some type of technical background in vegetation management of some kind. Half of 7 was a little hard for some of us to half of 7 people was kind of hard for us to get our arms around. So we decided that we would go with a minimum of 3 members were required to have a background in arboriculture or some kind of natural sciences.
No. Not while I'm on TV.
It allows for non-voting members. So if they wanted to establish a committee for Arbor Day or something like that, we could do that and still be within the limits of the ordinance. And we defined officers and how they're elected. That was something that wasn't in the ordinance before or not spelled out particularly well. Much of the rest of the regulation part remains the same. There are no new fines proposed or penalties or anything like that. So the mechanics of the way the ordinance works remain the same. Then the next big change is when we get into Article 3, which is where we talk about management of vegetation diseases and pest infestations. So these are things like emerald ash borer, Dutch elm disease, those types of things. The original article, which was 2, part of the ordinance, was very specific to Dutch elm disease. And the tree board felt like we needed to be prepared for other types of pest and disease infestations as those things are becoming, unfortunately, more common than we'd like to see. Good examples of that are emerald ash borer, brown tail moth, some of those other things that are moving their way up north are becoming more relevant for our region. And so we wanted to be prepared for that. And essentially that part of the ordinance, Article 3 now, just essentially took a lot of the language that was specific to Dutch elm disease and expanded it to allow the board to react to other unnamed diseases as they come to us. So it sort of gives a little bit more leeway to act in an appropriate way to things that we maybe haven't identified as problems yet. And then at the very end, we still kind of held on to some of the, because Dutch elm disease is such an important disease to manage, we left some language in there specific to Dutch elm disease at the very end. So that, like I said, the tree board has been working on this. They've done a great job. We've been working on it for a few months, and we think we're ready to bring it to public comment on May 10th.
Great. Good work on that, by the way. You guys are really doing an amazing job. Does anybody have any questions?
I can let Jeff go if Jeff wants to go first.
Okay, Jeff, go first. You're muted.
Yep, sorry about that. Hey, I had a quick question about the relationship between the tree board and the Maine Forest Service or other agencies which conduct surveillance on emerald ash borer and spruce budworm and stuff. I just was wondering if you could explain what that relationship is like.
Well, the thing to remember about that is that it's the tree board is specific to town-owned trees where we have maintenance responsibilities. So you notice in the ordinance, we specified that trees within rights of way that are state right of ways outside the compact, we don't have authority on. So that's when the Forest Service, and this is not intended to be something where we manage large plots of land, large lots, where you would have forestry management plans and that type of approach. So it is more of a specific within the rights of way kind of approach. And the tree board does work, we're a Tree City USA. And so the tree board does work with Maine Forestry Service and through Jan Santier to get a lot of information out there. We're kind of a conduit for information, I guess, if that would be the way to look at it, for all the information at the state level that comes through. If the state came through with, for example, emerald ash borer is a good example of that, where they're pushing a lot of information out about that, tree board would turn around and share that with the community.
Great, thank you very much.
Councilor Robertson?
Yeah, Rob, do you, you mentioned that in this thing, the Norway maple, which is an invasive species, which there's a lot of in Orono. Is there any, and I couldn't find it in this ordinance, but it might be somewhere else, requirement to stick to planting native species of plants and trees that are more indigenous to this area? Is that anything that is written anywhere? Yeah.
So that's one of the things, one of the charges of the tree board is develop a tree management plan. And within that plan, so as the ordinance allows the tree board to establish that plan, within that plan, we'll discuss invasives. You do see, I think in Article 3, when we talk about the general intent of in the statement of policy portion, we do mention invasives there as part of it. So if there were some significant issue, regional issue with an invasive species of some sort, we could fall into that to manage those species. But invasives will be a big part of, and that's the next big effort that the tree board is going to take on, is revising a very outdated management plan that will address, there'll be a chapter in there about how we manage invasives and how we get back to making sure. That's one of the things that the ordinance does. It does manage planting in public. So we wouldn't plant a Norway maple in Webster Park, let's say.
Right, right. Great. Thank you.
Any
I
other
just
questions? Okay, go ahead.
I just want to clarify that when the tree board creates its tree management plan, that's something that would come back to the town council when it talks about municipal officers, that you are the only municipal officers. Everybody else that works for the town are municipal officials. So just a distinction, wanted to make sure people understood.
Great, thank you. Councilor Perry?
I just want to say I'm very impressed with the work the tree board has done on this, and I'm ready to move this forward to a public meeting.
Thank you, Tom. Anything else? Oh, go. Yeah.
This had not gone through legal review yet. I'm not anticipating a lot of changes, but what gets presented at the public hearing might have just some tweaks, but not to intent, just to language.
Great, thank you. Well, any other questions before we move on? Well, great, thank you, Rob. I'm glad you're our tree warden and not me. So moving on to item number 4, Orono Police Department Community Service Division implementation update, which I'm sure Chief Ewing's going to be doing.
Yes, hi there. The lighting looks terrible. So I think Officer Lesky is here too. So I'm going to hand it off to him fairly quickly, and started by saying that the initial goal of creating this division was to kind of allow at least a couple of people to do less of the traditional enforcement type of efforts in town and focus more on kind of collaborating with other resources or other town departments, or even town businesses and community members to solve problems rather than forcing our way to solve problems through enforcement. So what I've seen in talking with Officer Lesky and Officer James is they have taken that idea and just hit it out of the park, like we kind of assumed that they would. I have seen already collaborations with the international students, with religious groups, with mental health resources, with code enforcement to deal with issues that are normally outside of our purview, helping with neighborhoods with that are, noise problems that are in our purview, but working with neighborhoods in order to not have to wait until the middle of the night when that call comes in, and kind of preempting it with connecting with the students and the neighbors. So I'm already seeing exactly what the idea was. The goal was to build those relationships, and it's happening already. Ed is, I'm pretty enthusiastic, but Ed is far more enthusiastic and probably a better speaker on this than I am. So I'm going to hand it right to him.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for inviting me. This has been 3 months. We started in February. It's middle of April now. And it's been 3 months of me saying, oh, it's just been so exciting. About 12 years ago, Sophie met me in the parking lot, as she does quite often. And first she asks, how are you doing? Then she asks about the entire family. And I remember this day, I said, Sophie, when you put me in the school about 10 years ago, I said, you gave me the best job in Orono. She did correct me that day. She said, may I say the second best? And then she told me she had the best. I'm not going to argue with the town manager, so I left it at that. And now that I was promoted to this position, I couldn't believe it got better. because I thought I had the best then, and it only got better. So I thank you for the council for allowing this position. I broke this down into different areas that I have, not I, but Courtney and I have been working with. And in each area, I have the sounding board of chief. He's aware of everything that I do. So the town of Orono, just working with the town, this position has allowed Courtney and I to work with code enforcement, everything from rats to dog poop, and it just cracks me up. Pat is an amazing individual. He is so much fun to work with, and we work hand in hand. In his ability to work with people just blows my mind, and I've learned so much from him already. As far as life safety with Rob, that's mainly a sounding board. We have such valuable knowledge in Rob. I just go to Rob every now and then and say, Rob, what do you think about this? Could you give me some guidance here? And he's a sounding board. When it comes to public works, we have worked often together for the last 12 years. And sometimes I just call them, because when you call anyone in public works, it's like calling a family member who actually likes you. And you could talk and talk and just have a wonderful time. And the whole time they're teaching you about town maintenance and what the public is actually looking for, because it may be something more than the question I received. And that's where Mike and Rob come in and they say, Ed, what they really want is probably this, and it's something we'll be able to handle, or that you may want to refer them to this area. So we just work hand in hand. Parks and Rec, Megan, we're just biting at the bit for summer, Courtney and I. We're ready to take the masks off and hopefully have a little more freedom to work with Parks and Rec and work with our wonderful community. The library, I've always said, and I'm no secret here, I call it the gem of Orono. It's the one place where everyone and anybody, no matter what their background, no matter status, they could go in there and feel comfortable. And I am so anxious for that building to open up so I could get in there with Courtney and we could do so much with the staff, the amazing staff there. And I could just go on and on with the town office, and it's so enjoyable to work in Orono and the people that you have hired there. It is a family. It is a family. Going on to the Orono seniors, we do have the Good Morning program, started many years ago. And it takes me about half an hour or more to call each individual in the morning. And it's because they want to talk about their lives or get some advice, and we just talk, we just chat. I also have contact with Orono Housing, the Parker Center. Every now and then, I just make contact. Have you heard of anything? Do you need anything from the PD? Do you need anything from the town? And I just speak with Rosemary and we just kind of have a good chat. Unfortunately, it sounds like she will be leaving and possibly retiring, and we'll just introduce another person and work with them. Community groups, this has been a blast, the community groups. I found out when I became the Director of Community Services that the Gilbert Street has I guess it's a Facebook group, and North Main Street has a Facebook group. And once they found out that the police department has a liaison or a person to go to, I got some emails very quickly. And the groups are amazing. They know they live in a college town. They know they have college neighbors, but there are times where the neighbors like to consume some items and get a little loud. So they said, Ed, what could you do here? So I just went to the neighbors and I introduced myself. Then I went to the property managers, introduced myself to them. And I'd have to say that just opening up a conversation between all groups, not together, but individually, and Courtney and I go into the groups again just to make contact. That has gone very well. And Chief and I are receiving emails from the groups thanking us. It has been one of the greatest years they have ever had. So that's very nice. There was a building in Stillwater Village Apartments that neighbors were having some bitter arguments, verbal only. So one of the officers asked me, Officer Oko, said, Ed, do you think you could do anything here? And nothing physical, just a lot of arguing. So I went to each individual, and there was something the other neighbors did not know. One child had a development issue, and after I explained that, there was peace in the neighborhood. It's just a matter of talking to people. That's it, and explaining situations. And there's never been another call there since. So we just work with people. The mosque in town, I haven't gone there personally, but I've talked to members within the mosque, and it's just about how do we as police work with you in incidents of hate bias and incidents of just learning how to police with your community. And I have had fabulous conversations where mainly I said, oh, thanks. I didn't know that. And it's dialogue. It's dialogue. And I also received information from a very young lady, high school, and her mother. And it was more, you know, if you ever take a report of hate bias, this would help or that would help. And it's a matter of we as police officers joining their world and saying, you know, I never knew that. And then I pass it on to chief, and we may have a training on it, or I email sergeants and I have them pass it on to their working crew. I met 3 times in the last 3 months with members of the LGBTQ community, and policing the family dynamics. If we were to go to a call within their personal family, mom, dad, and the children, and how better we as police officers can work with the family going through struggles. And that's the best, that's the only way I'm going to put it, because we got pretty personal, and I don't want to put that over the airways here. But it was a time where I said, I had no idea. Thank you. And one individual professional within Orono, she told me that she will help the Orono PD every step of the way in this, because it's the first time a police officer ever approached and said, how do we learn? How do we learn? And she is so willing to help the Orono PD in any way. She's not the only one I spoke with. Higher education contacts. Tell me if I'm just rambling on too much. If I
No, we're loving hearing this.
Oh, okay. The University of Maine, I participated in the Black History Racial Justice Challenge. Not all of it, because there was a lot. And once again, I said, oh, I had no idea. And so it's learning as an officer in Orono how to better relate to groups that, yes, I have related with, but now I'm starting to learn from them. And then I pass it on to the department and to chief, and we're just gathering information. And it's like I said, it's been 3 months of saying, I didn't know that. And we're just learning to be better police officers because of it. And Courtney Courtney's wonderful. Thank you for making her the CSO. Whenever my time is to retire, I hope she just goes into the position, because people love her. The international students, Coffee with a Cop, that was one of the best nights that I've ever had. I think possibly one of my first Zoom meetings. I didn't know you could connect with people over Zoom, but I'm saying, yes, you can. It was another night of saying, I had no idea. And they also said, I had no idea, because we were discussing policing in Orono. And many of them said, so that's why the police do that. And then at the end, I realized they truly are interested. And so I opened it up. I said, look, when COVID's over, who wants to go ride-alongs with me? And you'll see why the police officer parks this way, why we are so nosy at times, and why we enjoy coffee. And everyone, well, I shouldn't say everyone, I would say high 90%, they want to go on ride-alongs, and that would be with me only in an unmarked cruiser. And we would follow the calls around so they could be educated. And during that time also, I would be educated on the international students. And that's, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. University of Maine, Dr. Ian Cameron, he has made contact with me. I have spoken to his class for the last maybe 5 years, maybe longer, on suicide within the young person's culture. And we are booked next year already for speaking engagements at the university on the topic of suicide and how police officers can help. Eastern Maine Community College, I was on ethics and policing. I was a guest panelist, and that was enjoyable with Eastern Maine Community College. So we're with University of Maine already as police department. Your police department's with Eastern Maine Community College. And eventually I foresee us with Husson University also. Professional contacts. We had a Zoom meeting within Orono, within the police community in general. As you, the council, know, police are often called to be social workers, to be mental health professionals, and we aren't. So I said, how can I help my team? And Courtney and I bounced this around, and I said, why don't I just get a hold of NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and let's have a Zoom. And so they did agree to have a Zoom, and it was so wonderful because at the end, I said, we need a number. We need a phone number that we could call 24/7, because we know, you know, NAMI, that this happens at 3 o'clock in the morning when no one's around, and we need assistance in the mental health area. And NAMI, I just love that group. They gave us a phone number, and it actually works. It wasn't lip service. Officer James had to use it just maybe a week ago, and we received service. The person received help, and it was fabulous. So my hat off to NAMI and better serving the Orono police officer, how I enjoyed that group, because we need that. Town of Bangor, we had the privilege of joining the homeless discussion with that town, and I walked away saying, I am so glad I work in Orono, because that is a challenge that I had no answers for. But I'm glad I'm participating with the town of Bangor, because I need to learn how they are going to handle the homeless situation. And during the question and answer time, if you ask me, Ed, what would you do? I think I'd say, I know I'd say, I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure yet. Seaboard Security, I've been working with them. You notice our crossing guards for RSU 26. They are amazing people, absolutely amazing. They work in the freezing cold. They work in the freezing rain. They work all year around. And we're just so fortunate to have the crossing guards that we have, Seaboard Security. Police departments, I'll use the word SRO because everyone's familiar with that. Orono PD, VZPD, Old Town PD, and recently Bucksport PD. Once you've been an SRO for some time, you people get to know you, and then you get to know the SROs in your area. And we as SROs, we don't want to put juveniles in the system. So their officers and Orono PD officers realize that this is a good kid that just needs some guidance. And so they don't write a citation or a summons, and they get a hold of me if it's an Orono student, and they say, Ed, let me bounce this name off of you. And then once I get that name, then it is amazing the amount of resources that I have to focus that person into a different direction than the court system. So that just happened last week with Bucksport PD. One of the officers knew that I worked in Orono, and this was an Orono incident, an Orono student incident in Bucksport. And I said, thank you for not putting her in the system. We could help this family. And from that time on, this student has received the help that she needs. And this goes on from students that have graduated from years past. VZPD got a hold of Sergeant Hass less than a month ago. I said, yep, I'm familiar with the student. And the nice thing about Orono PD, VZPD, and Old Town PD, usually you ask for permission to go into their town or give them a heads up. And now it's just, hey, this was one of my students, I'm heading over. And they say, yep, whatever. That's the connection that Orono PD has with the different towns and the working relationships, which we need. Over the 3 months, we had, as you know, 3 local news agency interviews. If I never have another one, that'd be okay with me. Those are nerve-wracking, but the agencies were wonderful. RSU 26, under my notes, I just put much. Courtney and I work diligently with all 3 schools, and the work has been more rewarding than I have words to say. It's still a very safe school. It's still a very, it's a school that works with their PD very closely. And COVID has brought some challenges, as we know, with the building and construction, keeping the safety of the school. It's been workable, very workable. Personal developments, and I'll end with this. I've taken, in the last 3 months, school assailant training, people in crisis training, implicit bias and equity training in policing, federal emergency and management awareness of public information officer, and training in the recruitment of women and people of color, presented by the Law Enforcement Museum training. So that's just an overview of the 3 months. And it has been extremely, extremely rewarding. So Sophie, once again, I say, I have the second best job in Orono.
Thank you, Ed. You know, I usually I let everybody else go first, but I want to go first here for this reason. I adore you, Ed. I actually met you, I think for the first time was at one of the Thanksgiving dinner gatherings where we were putting food together, and your energy is just infectious, and I love it. And I just think that we are so fortunate. Once I found out that you were actually going into this position, I thought, what better person to be put in this position, simply because you do have all the attributes that it's needed to even remotely be able to do what this job requires. So my hat's off to you. I think you're doing an amazing job, and I think you'll continue to do amazing stuff. So having said that,
for having that confidence. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Is there any of the counselors who would like to speak on this, please?
Sure. Or go ahead, Tom. I'll go ahead, Tom.
You're muted, Tom.
Sorry about that. We thought you were the right person for the job, Ed, and there's absolutely no question that you are the right person for the job. we need to have you come back on a regular basis. I feel so good after hearing you talk.
It's an amazing place to work. It's infectious. It's,
You're infectious.
well, thank you.
And Ed, you know, Ed and I have a connection too. It's my son. So not our son, my son. But I just wanted to say, you said at the very beginning, it's like working with family who actually likes you. My question is, do you actually have family who doesn't like you? I can't even
family and I, we're very close.
imagine that.
We're very close.
Okay. No, you do a wonderful job and you are perfect for this. There is no other, I can't even think of another person in Orono that's as good as this. And I have trouble with you only doing this in only, I mean, 3 months is 12 weeks. Like, do you sleep at all? Are you sleeping? Are you eating?
I still get 7 hours sleep. I have time with the family because if I didn't, Sophie and Chief would be very upset.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you for your confidence in me.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you. This was a really positive, inspiring update. I just wanted two things. One, recommend a connection with Dan Tremble and Andrea. They both are ride-along supports that Bangor PD uses, who are out of Acadia Hospital, but they provide kind of that community policing, social work support for specific needs in the community, and they might just be good contact for you.
Thank you.
And the Bangor PD could connect you with them. I forget Andrea's last name for the moment. Then you talked about a lot of outreach. Are you doing any specific outreach to kind of understand or assess needs in some kind of there's pockets of socioeconomic need throughout Orono. Are you kind of pointedly doing some outreach in those communities also?
Would you be more specific? Because I'm not following. I don't understand the question.
I think we are. I think I understand what you're saying. I think, Ed, you could probably speak to what takes place at the school, say for kids that are food insecure.
Oh, yes, thank you. Now I'm following. See, this is one of those times when I say, oh, so that's, yes, is seniors in the school. If we find out that someone has a need as far as hunger or even bills, and that's seniors to children at the school, we have a whole team within the school, and we also have a whole team for seniors that we're able to get resources to them. So if we find out that there is a need, yes, I have been doing that for the last 12 years, but I never really thought about it. It's just something that I have been doing. So to answer your question, if that's what you were asking, yes, I am involved.
So internally within the town, we have Shelley, who runs the general assistance program. So there's some formal avenues there, but Ed is often a place that we go when we think that there might be somebody that is not maybe necessarily qualifying for general assistance or might not even be willing to apply. He has been a huge resource, whether it's in the school or just a general person. So I do think when you talk about marginalized communities in Orono, I think that socioeconomic divide is most definitely one that needs our attention.
Laura, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To your first point, Laura, I've contacted many times. I've been in contact many times with Dave Tremble. He is fantastic from Bangor, and I've utilized him over the years for people that we couldn't solve their problem, and Dave was able to come in on most occasions, able to come in and help us to get them into contact with resources at Acadia. So
Good, thank you. Sorry, good catch on the names. I got it all. I'm either forgetting or using the wrong name.
I don't remember, I don't recognize the second name that you gave, but Dave Trumbull for sure.
So I too, there's a reason I stop Ed every morning that, well, not every morning, but a lot of mornings when I see him, because he is an uplifting way to start the day, hands down. But outside of how awesome it is to listen to Ed and that it feels good, Josh and I came to you with an idea, and you gave us some latitude to create the Community Services Division. And we are seeing it pay dividends. We really are. And it is assisting the patrol division, taking some perennial problems. The rats on Margin Street have been a perennial problem, and Rob and Ed and Pat solved that for us, which is pretty amazing. And so I hope that in 3 more months, when Ed comes back with Josh, that we'll have another list of the accomplishments that we've had, because I really think this is a new way to look at policing for small departments like ours. And Ed has done a tremendous job, and Josh will give him all the credit, but this is his vision.
I'm so blessed. Ed is the best. He's doing all of my presentations from now on. And Sophie just very nicely said what I was thinking the whole time, which is, I told you so. I told you. And it's already working, and I'm so thrilled.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other comments?
Terry, just a quick one from me. I wouldn't want us to end this conversation without giving Josh Ewing a lot of credit for advocating for this program. You were a good advocate, and you were persistent at it, and you sold us on it, and thank you very much for doing that.
I agree. I think sometimes when we get involved in these things that we, one of my big things I always speak of is that when we in the last council meeting, this was brought up by a lot of councilors about we're Orono. We're not some other space where something's going wrong and all of a sudden we're going to imply that our people are part of that whole group. And I think this just displays why we are so unique. And I really do like the police department. I think we do an amazing job. I think we're fortunate. I think that the people that are part of this, a part of that whole group is amazing. And Ed, just like I said earlier, this is just really concrete foundation on why we are who we are. And once again, thank you. I appreciate everything you do and look forward to many more amazing stories, which, by the way, I'm a big stickler about time typically, because I don't want people going off on a tangent. I don't like that, but I was enjoying it. So I said, yeah, let's do this. So.
And Ed, from a parent perspective, and that's what I was trying to say, from a parent perspective, I'm very appreciative that you are here in town with our kids.
Thank you.
Our kids.
It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you a lot. And we look forward to hearing from you soon in the future. So we're going to move on to our next item, number 5, which is review of applications for vacant Orono VZ Water District trustee position, which is 1. Sophie?
Terry, would you be okay with flipping the planning board and the water district, because our planning board chair, Phil Ruck, is a volunteer, and he has been sitting on the attendee list, and I don't have anybody here to speak about the water board.
Oh, most definitely. So let's move on to number 6, review of applications for vacant associate planning board member positions, correct? Am I on the right one?
Yep.
Okay. Yes. So Kyle and Phil or is it Phil that's speaking?
Hi, I can talk about some of the planning board stuff in general, just to start out. So we have 7 regular board members on the planning board, and there's generally 2 associate members. We have both associate seats open currently. So I know we received a few applications, but just to give a little information, the planning board generally reviews site plan and subdivision developments, and then also makes recommendations on land use, ordinance amendments that go through the council as well. So there's sort of the technical development side of things, and then also the policy side of things that come up with the board. On the development side, there's sometimes a need for some technical capacity. There's a lot of different backgrounds on the board. I think we currently have some members who are really good with sort of the vegetation and landscaping aspect of things, and stormwater, and all of those areas. Jeremy Chubbuck was a member of the planning board. He recently moved away from the board, and he brought a lot of sort of kind of an engineering background and some of that technical knowledge to project review. So things like that are always things that we're looking for from applicants, and in general, happy to have, but also just enthusiasm from people interested in being on the board and really helping out in that role. So Phil, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I'm just actually thrilled to have 3 people that signed up to be on the planning board. It's been quite a while. I am curious, driving by the new line, if that's where people actually saw the positions. That was just a curiosity question. But to Kyle's point, we have qualified applicants. I looked at the applications, but again, we haven't had where we're usually picking skill sets that I recall for a number of years. So, the council, I guess that's why you get the big bucks. You can make that decision on who to pick. I mean, there's one younger applicant that's quite refreshing to see. We really haven't had many folks, a younger age that want to volunteer. I just hope that it's clear that they understand this is a volunteer position, but that desire to be a volunteer comes with a commitment. We do typically meet monthly, and we need that quorum, and it's helpful to have more ideas on the board. So I don't have any choices, between applicants. I'm not sure that's my role, or ever has been, but Kyle mentioned the other day when we spoke whether there'd be a possibility of advertising or trying to seek specific skill sets. I'm not sure that that's anything we've done in the past, but I'm open to suggestions. I'm happy to have 3 qualified applicants that want to fill seats. So it's really all I have to say. They need to understand the commitment. There's often a confusion. Some people get into this without understanding really what the planning is and how we function. That it's not, like reviewing projects and saying, oh, I like this or don't like that. It's, we have a set of rules in town that are approved by council, and applicants need to understand that, it's not, whimsy that we make decisions. We review projects according to, the standards that are set forth, and, that's how we operate. We do have an opportunity, obviously, to look at ordinance, reviews that come up before us, and that's important too. And we do have a role in that. Obviously, the comp plan development, we had an awful lot of involvement, from the planning board, and that worked out quite well. But and just those understandings that, I'm hoping that point is made clear by, either Kyle or the council. So that's all I had.
So let's open up for questions if anybody has any questions. Councilor Mitchell?
Yeah, So these are for associate member positions. On the full positions, do you have the skill sets that you need? Or were you saying we lost somebody that had a skill set that we really want to have on the board, whether they're an associate member or not?
Well, Kyle could say that, but we've been fortunate to have people in the past. Mark Kiddage was on the board for a long time. You know, he had an engineering background, understood plan review. Jeremy obviously knew what he was talking about. He's, you know, very skilled, always prepared. You know, I have an engineering background as well, so you know that certainly helps. It's not critical. You know, I've presented before planning boards, and there were no technical people essentially. So it varies by town. If you have the luxury to pick and choose skill sets, then you know, I guess that's a bonus. But I wasn't familiar that we ever really were too picky, you know, especially with 2 seats open for quite a while. I didn't know that we really spent a lot of time choosing, you know. So does that answer your question? I mean, you know, it helps the engineering stuff, but as Kyle said, you know, we've got foresters. You know, at times we've had multiple foresters on our board. We've had university folks. You know, it's worked pretty well. You know, Krista Schwinzer is our go-to, you know, botanist. She knows all the vegetative side. So I think we've had a good group for quite a while. But if we want to wait for a certain skill set or advertise for that, that's a choice that perhaps the council needs to consider.
Wasn't there an individual based on the applications that had like years of engineering or something like that, naval background?
Yeah, I believe
yeah,
one
I'm
of the
not familiar with that.
applicants.
I know 2 of the applicants. Yeah, was that Mr. Babbitt?
I was asking that question because of a comment that Kyle had made. So I have served on a planning board, and I did not bring
Yeah, so
level of expertise, but Kyle seemed to.
I definitely don't think it's a requirement. You know, and I mean, I think, you know, there are benefits of bringing people from a variety of positions. You know, I mean, the staff review portion of it and the plans prepared by the applicant's engineers look into a lot of that stuff. And I mean, on the town side, where, you know, I look at things and public works and the town engineer and code enforcement, you know, it's all being reviewed by multiple different disciplines anyway. So we need to, you know, kind of provide that information in a digestible way to the board to begin with. So yeah, I don't think it's 100% necessary. I was more speaking to some of the recent vacancies. That was their background. And, you know, so if those certain backgrounds were to be, you know, looked at again, it might bring kind of a similar feel to the board that, you know, kind of was existing previously.
Kyle and Phil, I have a question about when someone gets on the planning board, is there any training that goes on? So there's a possibility to have somebody who's sort of familiar, but then go through an orientation or training about, like the MMA, like, you know, we have a new counselor training kind of thing. And I imagine that happens.
Right.
Yeah, and then MMA provides training to all our associate members.
Okay. Does that make a difference when choosing an applicant? And I'll let Tom go. That you're going to have training as well?
Yeah, I think all the, you know, board members, anyone would have training to give them an understanding in general of what the planning board, you know, would do. And then we can obviously have, different, we've talked about this a little at recent board meetings of when we have a lighter agenda, maybe having certain, educational presentations to kind of fill things out. If there are certain areas that board members want to focus on, or they just want to learn a little bit more about. So, yep, I think there's room for those sorts of things.
Yeah, we've had workshops in the past prior to Kyle's employment with the town, where we'd have workshops on reading plans, those kinds of things. And I think those were helpful. It's been a while since we've had one, but then again, we haven't met in person for quite a while. So again, we've had the discussion. I do want to point out that town staff has just been fantastic as far as preparing the board. When I first started, it seems like an awful long time ago with the board, it was just a little bit more disorganized, but over time, the process has been improved immensely. And, with a bit of preparation, obviously before each meeting, and understanding what we're hoping to do, that, the town staff, it really does a fantastic job of preparing application materials or, our agenda items, so that it simplifies that process a whole bunch. So kudos to Kyle and Jessica and the crew to make our jobs easier.
Councilor Perry.
Couple of things I wanted to say. And first, Phil, we really appreciate your effort on the planning board. You've been there a significant amount of time and have really made a significant contribution to the community, and I appreciate that. I did serve on the planning board at one time, and like Laura, I brought no particular expertise to the planning board. And therefore, I'm more interested in finding the person that has the commitment and the energy and the willingness to do the work than to fill any particular skill set. I really like the idea that you mentioned of doing some workshops and some professional development with planning board members as time goes on. In the past, when we've had applicants, we've interviewed them and gotten a chance to talk to them about why they want to serve and gotten a chance to tell them what the commitment is. And I would imagine that's something we'd want to do again. We're very fortunate to have 3 applicants who I think are all good applicants.
I agree. Yeah.
So I'd be in favor of moving forward with setting up some interviews for these folks and making a decision in a reasonable amount of time.
I agree.
Actually, I would say that for both of these positions, both the water board and the planning board.
I agree. So Sophie, what does that look like?
So if the committee isn't wedded to having the interviews at this committee, with the change in fluoride, we have a little bit of extra time. We could do workshop. I've got 2 orders that I'm asking council to consider on the 26th at a special council meeting. So we could do workshop and then flow with it's 5 interviews, and interviews usually take 15 or 20 minutes, not very long. And I'm going to guess on Zoom, it might be even less because we tend to be a little bit more efficient. Then we could flow into a finance and operations committee if that works for you. That would allow you to perhaps consider who you want to move forward. And I could just do generic orders for the May 10th, and you could discuss and appoint at that point if you'd like.
May 10th?
May 10th, I think it's May 10th. That's off the top of my head. Yep, May 10th is the council meeting. The interviews would be part of the April 26th Finance Operations Special Council meeting night. And the questions we've used in the past have been very generic. It's been more, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to do this, and do you understand what the commitment is? And choosing to volunteer is a choice, but once you do it, you really do need to come to meetings prepared.
Yes.
And Phil has been willing to join us in the past when we did these interviews, and I hope that you might be willing to do that again.
I think I should be available that week. I'm gone next week and back a week and then gone the week after. So, but I think the week of the 10th would work. But yeah, again, Tom, I second that. I mentioned it earlier. They need to understand. I appreciate the volunteerism, and that's fantastic. But it doesn't really do us much good if you're not going to be at, you know, many meetings in a row. And we've had that situation, and you know, I get that it happens. You can't plan for everything, but they do need to understand that, you know, what we're trying to do. So,
Councilor Mitchell, do you have something else?
Does the term for these positions overlap with launching the comp plan update? Because that's something they should be aware of. I don't know. I mean, that wouldn't have been, because that makes it a bigger commitment, right?
So this is a 5-year term, correct? So it will at least, Kyle will be in data gathering mode at that point, I think, correct?
Yeah, at the very least, we'd be in the, kind of gathering information and probably starting public input phase.
So Sophie, is it safe to say that it's okay to put the water district trustee position, or like group it with this, as saying we're gonna go with the April 26th?
Yep.
And then the 10th to make a final decision? Okay, so we'll just.
Yeah, and if we have people who can't join us on the 26th, I will let Council Chair Perry know, and we can come up with an alternative arrangement perhaps.
Okay. Great. Anything else for Mr. Phil and Kyle?
No.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Great work.
Thanks.
We're going to move on now to number 7, Ad Hoc Council Environment Committee update. And so Cheryl's doing this. Cheryl, I just, before I forget this, because I just saw it on TV again, I just want to put it in for the environmental side of it. If you've seen Eco Maine's thing in southern Maine, like in the Portland, South Portland, where they're going around to recycling bins, and they have people who actually look at what's in it and give you like grades about how you're doing. So I just thought it was actually quite brilliant. So
I'm very familiar with Eco Maine. They have a pretty cool website too, actually. So first I want to say I sent a fairly lengthy kind of report, but I wanted to put the data that we gathered, or the it's more brainstorming, is kind of, we're not culling anything at the moment, into a table. So it made it a little bit easier. But I have to apologize because I sent you a PDF of an unedited piece. It's actually in the Google Docs. I think it reads a little bit better because I went back and I went, oh, that's awful. But anyway, so I also wanted to update Jeff and Laura. So it's a little bit more than just a quarterly. I kind of went back a little bit just to kind of say, so for Jeff and Laura, I've given you the members of the Environment Committee. So these are the people that I'm working with currently that are helping to shape this. The charge was in the beginning, and we may tweak it a little bit, was related to decreasing Orono's environmental footprint and increasing its resilience to withstand the impacts of climate change. And now we're kind of looking at the Maine Climate Action Plan as a, like I said, as a model, or as a reference, basically. So, so the Maine Won't Wait is the executive summary of that. It's actually big bodies of research that I didn't want to send to everybody. So the executive summary in the PDF is kind of what we're working on. And no, the council doesn't need to have that, but I just wanted to use that as, so that you could see how we're doing on the, kind of down. So, so we've been working on the draft, which is our charge. And you can see we started with transportation, the proposed possible actions. We haven't submitted this to anyone yet. This is just a draft. Strategies to help with our decreasing our greenhouse gases is one of the first things that we started with, was kind of different ways that we could either improve our transportation or lessen our use of cars, and start really looking at electricity and solar paths and things like that, increase fuel efficiency. So I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but these are some of the things that we have talked about, and we're just trying to figure out how to integrate. Well, we're not yet, but we will eventually try to work with the comprehensive plan and figure out and put a piece in about the environment and climate action and mitigation and climate events and things like that. A lot of our recommendations are to really focus on funding so we don't overburden the town. And that's happening right now at the legislative level anyway, the state level and the federal level. And so we're very well aware of, how much it's going to cost to do a lot of these things. But we also are trying to think about the future. So if we start to if we start to integrate this into a comprehensive plan that's not due or not upgraded until, final upgrade 2025, we're hoping that this will be more of a futuristic kind of look at what Orono might be doing at that time as well. So we can get started, and we have gotten started in a lot of ways. Under transportation, we also have connected bike paths and walking paths and making the village more accessible to walking, which we've done. Under increased fuel efficiency, upgrade municipal vehicles to higher efficiency vehicles, which could be hybrid or electric, and we're working on that currently. Anyway, so municipal buildings, homes and businesses. So all of these things that I have in this graph, this chart right here, are just brainstorming kind of things, and also using the Maine Climate Action Plan as like I said, as a model, and taking some ideas for that, but fitting it into Orono. So there's a lot of things that are in there that are statewide that don't apply to us. So I'm very aware of trying to make sure that what we do here is feasible and viable for our municipality. And then there will be some things that we'll add that's not in the climate plan, like waste management and things like that, that we're going to try to integrate also, which is going to be much more specific to our municipality as well. So in addition to this, we have written and submitted a waste diversion grant through the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. Did not get funded, but it's about recycling. And we are working on another project probably will be submitted in the fall. So we've kind of passed on the spring application, but we're getting a little bit more foundational to submit in the spring another recycling plan. We also helped move forward, or one of our townspeople, the product stewardship bill, which is in the legislature this term right now, and that final resolution will be used as testimony that we are a municipality that supports recycling, basically, as that comes up, as that moves forward through the legislative process. We just recently, last week, with Belle, and Belle's been amazing. She's here, but she's sitting over there. We met with Sanssouci to discuss the possibility of a solar project effort with Old Town. And so this project was to decrease the cost of municipal electricity by 15%. It's still in negotiations or discussions, but we really are interested in renewable energy credits. We had a long discussion about what that means. And does Orono want to go green? Do we want to get green energy off the grid, or do we want to just save 15% on our energy costs, with no guarantee that what we're doing is green energy? and electricity just goes into the grid from the solar array, and they are building that array in Old Town at the Old Town Airport currently. Or I talked to EJ Roach. I don't know if they've started construction, but they're definitely going to be doing it, I guess. They're looking for buy-in. The other part to this is that we also met myself, Sophie, some staff, and one of our committee members, Dan Dixon, met with Bangor to really start seriously thinking about a regional climate action plan. And a lot of the discussion is around funding. And I think that as a region, the state of Maine is kind of promoting this, that we all get together and have this plan. And we're thinking that this chart that I gave you right here might be a beginning point to get us together with Bangor, hopefully Brewer, and Orono, and Sophie might be able to talk a little bit more to this too, to start that process of creating a region that will be, I say shovel ready is my new favorite thing. So we might have, I just like it. I don't know why, probably because of the gardening thing. But anyway, so finding commonalities between our two municipalities and how we can link together our three municipalities if Brewer comes on board, and the University of Maine. So we're kind of calling the University of Maine a entity, I guess. But our council, our committee members are very learned about this stuff. We have some very responsible and very educated around environmental policy and environmental law and climate action actually on our team. So so I see this moving forward. So that's where we are.
Breathe. Does anybody have questions?
Questions, comments, concerns, thoughts?
I think this is great, and it really leverages a lot of expertise at UMaine, and I think the regional approach makes a lot of sense for other communities because it's going to be duplicative otherwise,
right,
for a lot of municipal work, planning.
Yeah, well, and we're not, like I said, we're not Bangor, so we're going to continue with Orono in that, what Orono can do, and then find commonalities and maybe some technical support. And transportation is a big, is kind of a big, it's foundational for climate action and, the area, like we heard from Bax tonight. So yeah, so there's some areas that we will find commonalities. There's some areas that Bangor will have some other needs that Orono doesn't have. We don't have industrialization, we don't have big hospitals, we don't have things that Bangor has. But hopefully as a region, we'll open ourselves up to more grants. There's green banks in the works. There's all kinds of things kind of coming down the pike, as they say. Electric vehicles, electric charging stations on the corridor, the I-95 corridor, that we could apply for as a region. So there's things that we can apply for. There's things that maybe won't work for both communities or all communities, but as a region, we can leverage a little bit our opportunities. So thank you.
Any other questions from anybody else? Thank you so much, Cheryl. Good job. So moving on now to town manager's report.
I love meetings like this because I haven't had to do much at all except for watch, which has been kind of cool. I do want to tag on a little bit with what Cheryl was talking about, just to say that I hope when council looks at the work plan and the current charge of the Environment Committee after we adopt the budget, that we might think about some ways that we might tweak the charge to provide a little bit more operational assistance to staff. That is a group that has a lot of technical know-how And it's been easy when I got the call from Sanssouci to have a place to just kind of take care of, will you vet this? And when you think you know what's going on, will you bring it back to me and we can prepare it to go through the community development or the finance and operations committee? I'd like to kind of open that up just a little bit more. They had a really tight charge and I think we're kind of pushing the bounds of it right now. But that is a thought. I wanted to make sure that council was in the written manager's report that I gave you, but make sure you understand that, number one, we don't have any meetings next week. Number two, our next time that we come together is Monday, the 26th, and we had been slated to have a public hearing on fluoride, but we are not going to because we learned that we can only hold that hearing. The next time we can hold the hearing is November of 2022. I would like at our next month's meeting of this committee to talk about, do we want to do a little bit more data gathering in terms of maybe a community survey or a more formal discussion with the Orono VZ Water Board to see if this is a community need or if this is something that a few vocal people are looking for. So we can either table it or we can vet it and set it aside. One of the two was kind of a thought. And I don't know, Councilor Mitchell, you have more insight than probably others.
I would love to get a better feel for whether there's a broad desire throughout the community to make this move. I can, and just get some education out there also around it.
So why don't, if it's okay with Councilor Grenier, how about if I prepare some options and thoughts and invite the water district, either trustees or the superintendent or both, to join us at the next community development committee meeting, kind of talk about what the next steps are.
That makes sense.
Right, and the public health perspective and the public, like the dental perspective, is what got fluoride in the water system to start out with. So I don't want to lose that
I've
perspective.
I've got a person that is the head of, so this is what I'm thinking. Let's have a discussion about it. I have the person that is leading the oral health coalition, which are a whole bunch of different groups in Maine that deal with many things, fluoride being one of them. And then we have the person that made the initial request. And I think if I brought Mark Leonard in and the district in, it will be a big meeting, but I think it would be worth it and maybe save us some heartache in the long run. If you're okay, awesome. So you all are experts in Freedom of Access Act. You know just how to manage it. It has been taking a lot of my time. So we have an individual who has, in the last less than a year, well, just about a year, made at least 45 information requests about the same incident, the same thing. And it is now getting duplicative, but just tweaked a little bit. So I have to go back through and do the work again. And what concerns me is if they made one request for all of this information, I would be able to say, okay, it's going to take me X number of hours and this many pieces of paper, and here's your bill. Do you really want all of that information? And instead, like last night alone, I got 3 requests, one right after the other. So I have reached out to the town attorney about the requests and planning to file an action asking for protection under the Freedom of Access Act statute from the serial request. And I'm saying it's becoming a burden to the town. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. If you think I'm way in the wrong direction, I'm happy to talk with council in an executive session with the town attorney if you'd like. This is just, it's becoming every time you turn around, he's hitting us with more. And I think Josh started out really trying to help and give a lot of information and answer questions. And it's just, here's a policy, ripping the policy apart. And we have to figure out what's public, what's not public, what's a document, what's just information in our heads, payroll records, just a lot of stuff that's taking a lot of different departments' times. So in general, I'm seeing some nodding heads like, you think this is a reasonable approach? Okay. I will tell you, I really don't like, this is not a first thought that I would have, because my first thought is somebody wants a piece of information that we have, we should give it to them. So I hope you know that this is not a normal step forward for us. Counselor Wingart has started off on a bang, and early this morning or late last night, don't know which one, I saw it early this morning, I had a draft land acknowledgement that I would also like to, I'm thinking bring back to this committee next month, but I didn't know if this should be held for DEI work, or could it go through this committee and then go through the DEI process after. It truly is, I'm looking for some guidance how to move that.
That was council work in the proposed path forward for all parties involved in DEI work. This was a council assignment, and so I think we should certainly see it first, and then if we wanted to run it through them later, we can. But it was on our plate. So thank you, Jeff. This is exciting.
My thought is that I would have a brief conversation with Councilor Wingart and either Council Chair Perry or Councilor Grenier as the committee chair, one of the two, about just a couple of thoughts I have. I don't know that I want to change it. I think that going to the committee as is important. I know that we're waiting for final feedback from one more technical help assistant, volunteer, somebody that you reached out to for help. And so we'll bring that back, but I'm really excited to be able to do that, hopefully in May. That would be kind of exciting. So I attempted to reschedule the elected officials training for next week. And based on the responses that I did receive from my doodle poll, there was not a time that was going to work for enough people. So I've reached back out to the town attorney, and he's given me another 2 weeks. So I'm just going to give dates that we have Zoom open that we could do. So I was approaching this a little bit different than other public meetings, because there really wouldn't be an expectation that the public would participate in this at all. It's a training workshop. The attorney would come in and provide, it would be taped, so if people wanted to see it, they could see it later. I am not aware of anybody on council that is celebrating Ramadan. And so my thought had been, if we could go later than sunset, if we had to, in order to get people in, because I know we have somebody that can only meet on Mondays right now, or after 7 on Tuesday through Thursday. And just want to see what you guys think about a little bit later to bring somebody in, or do you want me to wait and do this after Ramadan? And
Sophie, I'm good. Whatever you can tweak that works is fine. I will do. I'll be there for whatever you can do. That's fine.
okay. So we have a special council meeting. I have a, you will get a confidential email to talk about some information about an order that will be on that agenda, I would ask you, I will send it in the packet for the meeting in a sealed envelope. And when you're done with it, if you could destroy it, I would appreciate that. Sound good? And if you don't know how to destroy it, sometimes I get this. If you don't know how to destroy it, then you can send it back to me and I will take care of it. We are excited. We're in the final phases of the budget. It's supposed to be the back from the print shop on Tuesday. So it will probably be late Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning. So for people who have not been on council, the budget workshop is, the workbook is a notebook, a big one. It's not a little tiny thing. Are people good with me putting that in the biggest envelope I can find and still putting it on your porches? Or would you like to make arrangements to come get it? Porch is good?
Yeah, I'll come get it, Sophie.
You just have a standing, don't bother my
I
dog.
dare you.
Yes, that works. And finally, I had alluded to it in my manager's report, but it is, we are losing an officer, in the patrol division going to the town of Hamden. So Josh will be a little short-staffed. You'll see another round of advertisement going out. So we have we now have 2 vacant positions and somebody at the academy. But as I said in my report, we have a really high standard, and when it has proven to help us in the past to wait until we get the right fit. Orono is a unique community. Josh is doing, I think, a great job with that. So people are enjoying our limited walk-up service at Town Hall. So the way that works is we have 2 people most days assigned to the front desk. One of them is doing taking appointments, so that if you don't have a ton of time or you want something that you don't have to wait, you can make an appointment and come at your time. Otherwise, people are just ringing the doorbell, and if the other person is free, they'll usher them in, and you might just have to wait a little bit to be able to have your turn. But it's been beautiful weather, good time to wait outside under the portico. That I think has been going really well. And Lori is excited in the coming weeks to be announcing to the world kind of how they can participate in sign up to come into the library. Very limited numbers. And although the library is 6,000 square feet, it's got a lot of stack space, and most people want to be in similar areas. So we're kind of limited in how we can keep social distance and keep things clean. So we really appreciate how much the community is willing to work with us and their patience. And we're excited to start opening up a little bit more. If anybody wants to see the town manager, the code enforcement, community development, we're all here. It's open. Somebody can buzz the front door and ask if they're, somebody's free, or they can call and make an appointment. So I think we're moving along okay. And the last, I don't know if it's last. So we are working with the university. I got the scope of work back for the I put in the manager's report that we had reached out to the university about running the technical aspect of the pool and taking care of the lifeguards. I think this is a win-win, but ultimately that's going to come as a contract for the town council, and want to make sure I'm on the right path with that you're good with the idea that we'd have somebody who knows what they're doing, helping to supervise, train, recruit lifeguards to watch folks and make sure that people are safe.
Sophie, on that note, I am starting to get a lot of parents who are really wondering if the pool's going to open. And I have just been saying, watch the CDC guidelines and make sure. I said, probably if we're in a high COVID situation, you know, in June, which doesn't look like we are, but are we on track basically to open the pool this summer?
Yeah, so that's part of the reason why I want to look at this more formalized, permanent solution, I think, to helping us keep highly trained, capable guards who would be doing probably more safety sensitive stuff with an indoor pool than an outdoor pool when you look at COVID stuff. So Mitch and I talked about this, and Megan, because, you know, Megan will be taking over Parks and Rec on July 1st. So we chatted about this earlier this week, and we don't know what the number is yet, and we don't know specifically how it's going to work. But the CDC, the US Fire Administration, who, believe it or not, is knee deep in this, and the National Parks and Rec Association are all giving guidance. And what's so funny is they give absolutes and then they say, but you can't really look at this absolute. You've got to look at a combination of things. So part of what we're looking at is how can we open it in a safe way? Do we need to, it's probably not going to look like it has in the past, where you can dump 75 to 100 kids in the pool to enjoy from 11 o'clock to you know 5 o'clock closing. Right, it's going to look different, but we really want to try to make it a low threshold to be able to get in. We're thinking that swim lessons are probably not going to be something under the current rules that we can do. And if we don't do swim lessons, we probably would back the time that the pool opens so that there would be more hours in the day that the pool would be open. But we're still working at that, which is part of what we're hoping to be able to accomplish when we get an agreement together. I'm hoping to have something to you at the May meeting to consider for the operation. But yes, the pool has to open.
Councilor Mitchell.
Yeah, I just would have a question about the not doing lessons. I worry like it's a life safety issue for those kids. And even if there wasn't like the advanced, like I can swim a mile lessons, I feel like those early lessons are catching kids at a window where they're not fearful yet. Like they're, and we are like, I would, other places are pulling it off somehow, even if it's small numbers, but if it was limited by residents, I wouldn't think there would be huge numbers anyway. But
so from my perspective, Laura, it's more about preparing council for the worst case scenario and working with the university to see what we can do as safely as we can do it. And I do realize that the rules for an indoor pool are different than the rules for an outdoor pool, but ultimately we've got to figure it out, and I need the technical guidance on board with me to be able to figure that out. So that's all I have.
Wow. So having heard that, so I actually, before I let everybody go, I want to say thank you. I think this meeting, and like I said at the front end, I'm always very much about keeping things on task. I think this went brilliantly well. I think you guys were all respectful, watching the little things below, which is normal. And I want to say thank you. I think that when we do these things together, while being mindful of how it works and just really doing as we go, and I try to say you, it works much better than just kind of random stuff. So I want to thank you for kind of following the process that we've all agreed to. So if there's nothing further, I will say goodbye to everybody, and everybody just wave and we'll all have a good night. Enjoy. And we'll see you next week.
Bye,
On
everyone. Thank
the
you.
next chapter.
Thank you.
Have a good week off.